Hey guys, what's going on? It's If You Have to Pick Three. I'm Matt.
And I'm Zach.
If you haven't joined us for one of these before, this is the show where we go ahead and we're given a topic and we have to both pick a top three list in said topic. And then out of our 6 choices, we go ahead and put together a final 3 list. So, Mr. Zach, what are we picking today?
Matthew.
Zachary.
Are you ready to feel old? Don't answer that. I know you're not. But guess what? It's time that we have to face reality. This year, 2020, there are a ton of classic albums celebrating their 30th anniversary. 1990, the beginning of a new decade and the end of an old decade. I know that's how time works. Don't correct me. I know. But it really was an interesting time in music because there were so many innovative things that happened in music in the 80s. And it was the beginning of even more innovation to happen in the 90s. All of you have listened to a bunch of podcasts from us where we've gone into depth about certain years of music in the 90s, or even just the whole decade of music videos. So I thought it was really important for us to make a list of the 3 best albums celebrating their 30th anniversary this year. Are you okay with that, Matt?
I guess I have to be since I'm sitting here.
Well, I mean, at any point you could just walk out. No, Matt, no! Anyway, how about you go first?
All right, fine. All right, we're going to start this out with an album that I think is criminally underrated.
Criminally, you said?
Criminally underrated because not a lot of people get into just instrumental albums. For whatever reason, they just don't find them that interesting, and they don't get real radio play. They don't get real fanfare unless you get into the musician or get into just a lot of what they've done through the grapevine. The person who I'm talking about, and you can correct me because I know a lot of people have an opinion on this, he is probably the best instrumental guitarist ever, in my opinion, Mr. Steve Vai. And he released in 1990 his best album to date in Passion and Warfare. This album is Steve, I think, at his finest. He's released a lot of albums. He's done a lot of work through the years, but I think this is his best representation of work. On this album, you have songs like Erotic Nightmare, The Audience is Listening, but the real standout and what most people on the internet do to react videos is they watch a performance that Steve did of For the Love of God, where he did it with an orchestra. And just watching not only that performance, but just knowing what he does when he performs this song. And it is almost like otherworldly what he gets out of the guitar on this particular song. So for those reasons alone, I'm going to say that this is one of the best albums of the 90s. Granted, there's of 1990, excuse me, not of the 90s. But there is a lot of music out there, and I think, once again, this is a criminally underrated album. If you've never heard this album, go listen to it. I guarantee you won't be disappointed, especially with those 3 songs. So that's number 1. Number 2, and number 3, actually, are both going to be debut albums.
Oh, snap.
Number 2 is going to be, well, it is the debut of what we now know as Pantera.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for specifying and clarifying here. Go on.
It is the debut of what we know as Pantera. In the 80s, Pantera was just another one of your typical hair metal bands, and there was not a lot of fanfare. The band even wants you to forget that they were a hair metal band because Dimebag Darrell went by Diamond Darrell. Let's just say that. But now, in the 90s, they shifted their focus and released the first album of the real Pantera, Cowboys from Hell. The opening track is insane, and the rest of the album lays the groundwork for what would be one of the most influential metal bands of all time. So, for those reasons and those reasons alone, I think it's pretty safe to say that that's one of the best albums of the 90s.
If I may just add a little quick plug here, Matt and I love Pantera so much that we recently, in celebration of the life of Dimebag Darrell, unfortunately last year was the 15th anniversary of his death, we actually each picked our 3 favorite Pantera songs.
Mm-hmm.
And then we fought it out. One of us had to walk it off, the anger that we had that one of our songs didn't get picked there.
Walk on home, boy.
We walked on home. But definitely recommend that you give, if you have to pick 3 best Pantera songs, a listen.
So that would be my number 2 album. And my 3rd album is another debut album. Like I said, this time it is a real debut album. This one is, I think, kind of typical of, let's say, rock bands in the 90s, where they released killer debut albums. Like, there was not one bad song, or maybe there was, a song that wasn't as popular as the others, so it kind of got buried deeper in the album. But this one is the debut album from Alice in Chains, and it's Facelift. So just to rattle off the tracks that start this album: We Die Young, Man in the Box, Sea of Sorrow, Bleed the Freak. I mean, this is all of the songs that you know and love from Alice in Chains, and this is the debut. Granted, the band formed in 87 and took 3 years to get the debut out, but I mean, if you're going to put out a debut album like this, that's a huge mission statement for you as a band of what you're about and the quality of music to come. And we know the story of Alice in Chains after that. I mean, granted, if you don't like the band, obviously you're not going to like the music, but if you like Alice in Chains, you know the catalog of music that they've released since the debut, and the debut was it was the start of everything, and it was just amazing to see what they were capable of just from the start. So there you go. Those are my top 3 best albums of 1990. So just to clarify, we've got Steve Vai, Passion and Warfare, Pantera's quote debut album in Cowboys from Hell,
The unofficial debut.
the unofficial debut, and number 3, Alice in Chains and Facelift.
All phenomenal albums. Hard for anyone to argue, except for me.
And
I can
you're
argue.
gonna fail.
I'm going to succeed. And I'm going to start off really strong with the first pick that I would actually argue might be one of, if not the best metal albums.
I knew you were gonna do it. I
Of
knew
all
it. I
time.
knew it. I knew it.
Oh, I don't know if you do.
Oh, I do.
Megadeth, Rust in Peace.
Not the one I was thinking of.
Ha! Fooled you, son. And it's funny because I love Megadeth, but I'm not like, oh my god, I'm fanatical about Megadeth. But this album, it was Marty Friedman's first with the band, and you can just tell he brings a whole new energy to the group and technicality. You got Holy Wars, you got Hangar 18, but then you got a song like Tornado of Souls, which literally, I can't emphasize how incredibly structured of a metal song that is, to the point that if someone who literally has been living under a rock or coming from outer space and has no idea what metal is, I would actually play the song Tornado of Souls.
Metal?
It's the riffs, the solos, even Dave Mustaine's voice, who, let's be honest, was never that amazing and has not really aged well. Even his voice is on point. It's just literally a perfect metal song and metal album in general. It's what you want from metal. It's not the most guttural vocals, so you can actually understand what they're saying, but it's just so heavy. I mean, it's melodic enough to make you just in awe of it. So, Rust in Peace. First album. Arguably the best metal album of 1990, if not all of the 90s. Yeah, I said it. Yeah.
No.
Said it. Second pick. Going in a different direction here. Public Enemy. Fear of a Black Planet. One of the most popular rap albums of the 90s, and one of the best of the genre, dare I say, with its political messages, with its great beats, and just Chuck D is literally one of the greatest voices and rappers in hip-hop music. I mean, forget even just the song itself, Fight the Power. The whole album is just an amazing rally cry for a time that needed a political voice. And it's easy to kind of get distracted by Flavor Flav, especially as more people recognize him.
Boy.
Well, even just more people recognize him for his reality TV stuff than they do for the powerful music that he was a part of. But Public Enemy really is one of the most influential hip hop acts who don't get enough credit, dare I say. And you might go, well, of course they get credit. I was like, yeah, but they deserve more. So definitely one of the best hip hop albums of 1990, maybe even of the 90s. Fear of a Black Planet. Third, this one was a little trickier. A lot of options and places to go. I didn't initially want to go back to metal, but it was actually a really good year for metal, 1990, dare I say. You definitely found some bands who, as they were getting kind of stuck in either trying to literally be the polar opposite of hair metal or just play to what was popular at the time. There's definitely, of course, hair metal was definitely still popular by 1990, but you started to see some bands go, you know what? No, you can be heavier. You can be a little bit, you can be a little bit more extreme. No pun intended. And a band that said, you know what? Enough of this hair metal crap. Yeah, it's been serving us well for the past few years, but it's time to just really get heavier. And one band that took that to heart and decided, all right, the time is now to get more extreme and more in your face was a legendary band. A band by the name of Judas Priest.
I thought you were going to say Tenacious D.
No, they came years later. But Judas Priest, of course, everyone, they were already huge by the time they released Painkiller. But they really upped their game. They decided, you know what? We're hearing bands get a little bit more extreme, like Megadeth, like Metallica. Shut up. Actually, like embracing the heavier styles. And you know what? Maybe Turbo Lover wasn't the greatest choice of ways to go. And just released an incredibly crushing album. An album that proved that, like, yeah, we've been around for a while at this point, but we still got it. I mean, even the softer songs like A Touch of Evil just rip. And then you got the title track that is just full-on speed in your face. And Nightcrawler. Oh, such a great metal song. Like, literally, there's some people who are quick to be like, oh, Judas Priest, they keep calling themselves metal gods, but they're actually more hard rock. Well, no, you listen to Painkiller, and they came like, oh, what was that about us being hard rock? That's what I thought. Metal Meltdown. Boom. Like, they proved that they were a metal as F band with Painkiller. So that's number 3. So to recap, we got Megadeth, Rust in Peace. We got Public Enemy, Fear of a Black Planet. And number 3, Judas Priest, Painkiller. So now it's time for us to fight.
Yeah. So this is going to be an interesting list.
I will absolutely agree to Alice in Chains' Facelift.
Yeah.
That really, because that was the first sign of change.
That was the
happening.
That was the stamp of grunge.
Like, that was the first time. I mean, grunge bands were starting to grow up, cultivate. Jane's Addiction were also starting to like really highlight that, like, you can be popular in alt rock.
I don't associate them as much with the change as Alice in Chains.
Well, Jane's Addiction were still a little bit more in the underground.
Yeah.
But Alice in Chains was the first time that people went, huh, this could be something. They were the first bridge between, because also, I mean, you talked about Pantera being like a hair metal band from the 80s. You look at some of the stuff that Alice in Chains were doing before they got signed. They were a hair metal band, like maybe even hair rock band. Like, they had like a lot. They made Flock of Seagulls look like a garage band from the real look. But then I guess they wised up and they saw what was happening in the Seattle scene at that point, before, like with Sub Pop and Soundgarden, and realized, you know what, this is what we actually like, and let's really delve more into this. And then Man in the Box,
yeah. How could you? That's like one of the grunge anthems.
Wow, 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 wow.
That is the weakest wah pedal ever.
I'm the man in the box. So that's definitely going to be the final 3.
Yes.
Definitely. So that leaves us with a ton of other picks.
Uh-huh. I'm okay with leaving off Steve Vai.
Oh, yes. Sorry, was that not discussed? No offense to Steve.
Steve, he's an amazing guitar player, and it's an amazing album, but it didn't lay groundwork for a lot. It was just his finest work. I just think that, and it always will be, just a criminally underrated genre where, like guitar players like him, Satriani, Yngwie, they'll always kind of take the back burner just because it's all instrumental. Once again, if you've never heard Passion and Warfare, you need to listen to this. There's a reason why he's re-releasing it on vinyl and he's putting it on special colored vinyl and whatnot. I mean, for Christ's sakes, the guy actually, during, I think it was this time or maybe a little sooner, he actually took blood from himself and put it into his guitars. The man is insane. And the playing on this and the album itself is just incredibly put together. So go listen to it if you haven't.
In the spirit of being nice, I will also take Painkiller off of the conversation.
Okay.
I love that album, but I also fully admit that compared to others, I mean, it's definitely, I would almost argue that it is Judas Priest's finest work. That even compared to like Screaming for Vengeance and Hellbent for Leather, like Painkiller is really their best work. But this is not the best albums of Judas Priest. This is the best albums of 1990.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll take Painkiller off the list, which leaves us with 3 albums: Pantera, Cowboys from Hell; Megadeth, Rust in Peace; Public Enemy, Fear of a Black Planet. I would like to say that number 2 slot goes to Public Enemy.
Interesting.
And then we have a big old metal royale for that 3rd spot. It was a massive record and an extremely important record at the time too.
All right, let's go with it.
Cool. Now comes the painful.
Okay. I'm going to say this. While people might say with Megadeth that, yeah, this is their best album, I'm going to go back to the arguments that we just made for Steve Vai and for Judas Priest not to be on this list. It's not their best works. It's the best albums of 1990.
No, I get that argument, but I would...
Because I'm going to say that that's not even my favorite Megadeth album.
Ooh.
I'm pushing hard for Pantera because this was the start of something. This was the start of where metal was going, and this was the start of the band that carried the metal flag.
But I would almost argue that even within like the span of 2 years, the band that Pantera was on Cowboys from Hell was considerably different than the band on Vulgar Display of Power.
I don't think so.
If we were talking about Vulgar, absolutely, hands down. And I love Cowboys from Hell, but I feel like that is a different band than what we're talking about. It might have gotten the help start, but I just, in my mind, and we even discussed this in the If You Have to Pick 3 episode of Best Pantera Songs, hashtag shameless plug, the man that sang Cemetery Gates is no longer with us. Anselmo hasn't been able to hit those notes in years and decades. And to me, it's like, I can't imagine Pantera, even in 1994, being able to record a song like Cemetery Gates.
Okay, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about 1990. We're talking about Cowboys from Hell. And we're talking about an album that launched what would be the metal juggernaut for the next decade. We're talking about the beginning of something special that made everybody stand up and take notice. Yeah, Megadeth released a good album. And yes, they have a new guitarist. And it might be a great technical album. And it might be a great guitar album. But it wasn't the start of anything new. We're talking new. We're talking fresh. We're talking Alice in Chains released their debut album, which rocked the hard rock world and arguably started the grunge movement. We're talking about the start of the juggernaut that influenced so many other metal bands to come. And then if you really want to go down this road, I'm going to piss a lot of people off when I say this. Whenever you talk about Megadeth, you're talking about a second-rate Metallica.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know. I did it. I said it. So what? So fucking what? Anyway, but Pantera and anybody who is anybody at this time was like, oh, wait a second. There's something different here. This is wow. And everybody from there forward just massively influenced by this band. And this was it. This is the start or the rebirth, whatever you want to call from what they were to what they are now.
I'm not happy at all about this.
I know. Hashtag facts, bro.
Hashtag facts. but I will submit and agree to Cowboys from Hell.
So,
That means that on our combined list, if we had to pick 3, the best albums of 1990.
I said, well, we just did pick 3.
To recap. Is that better, Matt?
Yes.
You like that better?
There you
go.
go.
Recap. If we had to pick 3 of the best albums of 1990, we would pick Pantera's Cowboys from Hell, Public Enemy's Fear of a Black Planet, and number 3, Alice in Chains' Facelift.
In no particular order, may I add. No particular order.
Do you agree with us? Do you? You don't? Well, let us know then. Go to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, @Epic Footnote, and let us know what you think are the best albums that are currently celebrating their 30th anniversary. Thanks so much for listening, and we hope you listen to another episode soon.
Thanks, guys. Take it easy.